Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's workshop. I'm really happy that you've decided to spend your time with us as we explore breaking the silence, working with HIV at the intersections of HIV and the lives of LGBT people. My name is Reverend Mike Schoenemeyer. I work for the United Church of Christ as the Executive Director for the United Church of Christ HIV and AIDS Network and as Executive for Health and Wholeness Advocacy. In the United Church of Christ, we actually have an office that works on lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender concerns, and that's the other hat I get to wear as well. And so these are issues that are very near and dear to me. And it's my pleasure to serve as your moderator today and to introduce to you our panel of speakers who will be sharing with us around some of the various aspects related to our topic. And let me begin by introducing one of our speakers is Bishop Sinyojo, who comes to us from Uganda. Bishop Sinyojo is the director of the St. Paul's Reconciliation and Equality Center in Kampala and has done remarkable work, land-breaking work, on a variety of concerns serving the community in Uganda in very inclusive ways. I'd also like to introduce to you my colleague and dear friend Sharon Groves, who is the director of the Religion and Faith work at Human Rights Campaign, which in the United States we often use the shorthand simply HRC. So, I also get to introduce my colleague, the Reverend Anthony Sullivan. Anthony is part of the leadership team for the United Church of Christ HIV and AIDS Network and doing a lot of work in the Chicago area. He's a fellow with the African American HIV University that's run by the Black AIDS Institute and is doing a lot of incredible work also on the issues of inclusion. So it's great to welcome you here. And I'm meeting for the first time McDonald Sembreka, Reverend McDonald Sembreka, who comes to us, I believe, from Inarella. I know that it's with Inarella. He's going to be speaking about the SAVE model. So one of the things that sometimes happens when you're organizing a large event is people get double booked. And our dear friend JP Heath got double booked, and he's filling a slot that JP is not able to be here because he needed to be at another workshop. So we want to welcome McDonald as well. Thank you for being here. Great. So at this time, I'd like to ask Sharon to share with us a little bit of how we understand the context of this work at the intersections of HIV and the lives of LGBT people. Sharon?
Yes. So I've been told that I don't have an inside voice and only an outside voice. So I hope that means you can hear me. I'm afraid maybe my outside voice is not quite loud enough. I still need to talk up. Okay. Stand up. Okay, I'll stand. So this panel really is an intersectional panel. We were actually 4 separate panels that were asked to combine together. And we thought that was going to be an impossible challenge. And Mike and I spent a lot of time on the phone trying to figure out, okay, what could we do? How could we help make this work? And actually, I'm kind of excited because I think this is exactly the kind of conversation that needs to happen, which is at the intersection of work on HIV/AIDS, work on LGBT equality, work on faith. And so we'll see how all this goes, but I think it should be quite exciting. So my role here is really to set the context for the conversation. And I want to say right off the bat that I'm not a subject expert either on HIV/AIDS or global LGBT equality or inequality. But I do direct the Religion and Faith program at the Human Rights Campaign, which is the largest national, in the US, LGBT advocacy organization. And I know that in that capacity, I can't sit on the sidelines when I see sisters and brothers across the globe suffering And when I see powerful religious leaders, often from the US, using religion as a cloak to spread a virulent message of intolerance across the globe that literally puts people's lives in jeopardy. With a global economic downturn that needs scapegoats, we are actually seeing a rise in homophobia in many parts of the globe. And with a rise in homophobia comes a rise in fear and secrecy. And with a rise in fear and secrecy comes a rise in HIV rates. So I'm really grateful that the Ecumenical Advocacy Alliance saw fit to allow a workshop that addressed LGBT people moving forward. Getting such a panel into a conference like this is not an easy task, and we owe a lot to Mike Schoenemeyer to making it happen, and it's not without controversy. And as far as I can tell, it's precedent-setting. At the 2008 Ecumenical Pre-Conference in Mexico City, Jackie Patterson observed, quote, "I appreciated the dialogue around gender and specifically patriarchy in the church, but there was no space in the program for the LGBT community and its issues. Unfortunate, given the early and continued epidemiology of HIV, as well as the continued discrimination against LGBT people. How can there be an entire HIV conference without space for LGBT matters when we have had activists like Saziki Sigasa and Salome Musa, champions for HIV justice, murdered in South Africa in a vicious hate crime? When we have Solomon Adderley Wellington, a noted gay HIV activist in the Bahamas, murdered? When we have the president of Gambia vowing to lop off the heads of gay people and criminalize any who offer safe harbor? This was 2008, and unfortunately, we have many, many examples of brutal discrimination, criminalization, and torture that we could add to that list. But 4 years does make a difference, and we're seeing workshops like this one, and evening workshops tonight. You'll hear there's one on sexuality, justice, and HIV/AIDS at 7:30, and a gospel concert featuring many LGBT same-gender loving performers on Monday night, as well as conversations that are continuing all the time throughout this conference. And there may be others that I've missed. So this is a very good sign, and it's indicative of the hard work of many of you, that you've been doing out here. And much of that work is underneath the radar screen. A preacher I like, Reverend Rudy Rasmus in Houston, wrote in his recent book, Touch, "Physical touch has the power to comfort, affirm, and heal, and even the power of life and death. Jesus' ministry was one of touch. He touched those considered dangerous and contagious, those that it was better to pretend didn't exist. By this touch, he brought the marginalized out of the shadows and said, 'I recognize you and I respect your dignity.' The history of HIV/AIDS also traces a history of public stigma that begins as an aversion to touch. In the early days of the HIV virus, people were frightened that if they actually literally touched someone, they could get the disease. A colleague of mine remembers working on Capitol Hill when a daughter of a physician, someone who should have known better, told her a gay man with HIV was coming down the hall and that whatever she did, she should avoid touching him. Instead, my colleague decisively reached out her hand and by a firm handshake communicated without words that I see you and I honor your whole humanity. Actions such as these that so often go unnoticed are as life-saving as Jesus' ministry among the lepers of his day. And this kind of simple recognition of the full dignity and humanity of those with HIV can't happen if we can't even have a conversation about sexual orientation and gender identity. Recognizing our full humanity should be the starting point for our work as people of faith. But sadly, those charged to care for our bodies and our souls too often do so by ignoring the fullness of who we are. They refuse, literally and symbolically, to touch or be touched by those they are charged to help. Treating HIV while allowing the stigma against LGBT people to remain unchallenged is essentially a ministry of avoidance. It communicates that we don't want to get too close to you because you might rub off on us. Sadly, we know that a majority of HIV/AIDS funding is channeled through religious institutions that are either hostile, avoidant, or ill-equipped to address the full humanity of the people they seek to help. Without finding ways to listen and affirm people's whole humanity, we become part of the problem we seek to solve. There is an urgency now around the work happening globally, and it requires a new level of coordination with those of us who are doing work in the intersections of HIV, global justice, LGBT equality, and faith. And no matter where we stand, we have to stretch ourselves at this moment. Those of us who have done or who are doing LGBT faith advocacy in country-based models, and that would be, I would definitely include myself in this, need to take up the charge to seek global partnerships, alliances, even if it means that we may be going into terrains that feel unfamiliar and even threatening. And those of us who work on global LGBT equality in a secular environment need to get really, really curious about faith. And not just about its oppressive force, but how it serves as a place of salvation and community building for many, many people around the globe. And those who are doing HIV/AIDS work in a faith context need to do more to provide culturally competent ways to lessen the oppressive force for LGBT people. As you hear from the variety of brave advocates today who are building these bridges from different sectors, I encourage you to do what I intend to do. Listen intently and consider how to take the power and influence you have, and we all have it no matter where we're situated, to more effectively use that power to turn a splash into a wave of transformation so that we can change the lives for all of us across the globe. I believe this is the challenge of our moment, and it's a challenge that we can ill afford not to take. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. You challenged us with some good words, and you've brought to our mind the posture of listening carefully to each other, intently to each other so that we can understand each other. And I think a piece of that also encourages us to speak in ways that help us to share things that people can understand, to find the language that is communicating with the people that we're working with at the time.